Wagner Group members, musicians, orchestra players, the PMC Wagner is the most secret organization. But now we are going to raise a curtain over the secret and tell you about the most scandalous and bloody operations of the Russian mercenaries.
We turn now to something called the Wagner Group.
Russian private military company Wagner.
Group, as we know it, first popped up in Ukraine.
You will discover how to become a part of the Wagner Group, how much they pay to the mercenaries and what they actually do. Kill, crush, no matter whom, kids, women, elderly, men. Here we go, hold the arm. Jumbo, a sign of mercenaries. Why has the Kremlin been persistently denying the existence of a private army? And how had the mercenaries got to the newest tanks and fighter jets? They have a right to push through their business interests at any place in the world. How does the Wagner Group get control over African diamond mines and Syrian oil fields using fake companies? This name terrifies presidents, prime ministers and generals. Come on, wake up your orchestra, man. Let our Russian PMC sound everywhere. Why do Russian mercenaries demonstrate sadistic violence, brutally slaughtering human rights activists and journalists? If you go with us, there is no turning back. No one will return to the prison. Why does the owner of the private military company, Yevgeny Prigozhin, personally recruit convicts for the war and openly give orders for the execution of Wagner soldiers? I was told that I would be tried. And most importantly, what will the lack of control and impunity of the Wagners and their leader turn into for Russia? Nowadays, the annual turnover of private military companies is estimated at $400 billion, and the most powerful is Blackwater, an American company recently renamed Academy. In 1998, it was founded by Eric Prince, a former Special Forces officer. At first, the company, commissioned by the Pentagon, guarded strategic facilities and trained Navy SEALs. Then it signed a contract with the CIA to protect agents hunting Bin Laden. Nowadays, Blackwater has 150,000 fighters. This company participated in 250 military operations. The most notorious one was the neutralization of Somali pirates. In 2011, pirates killed 7 sailors from the United Arab Emirates tankers fleet, which completely infuriated the oil sheikhs. They turned to Eric Prince, and it took mere 2 years for his men to solve the problem with the Somali pirates. Blackwater commanders used lethal fire without warning. Besides, they were equipped with heavy machine guns and speedboats, and pirates with Kalashnikovs and old boats. The example of Americans inspired Russians, as it often happens. In 2013, 2 Russian businessmen, Vadim Gusev and Yevgeny Sidorov, registered in Hong Kong Slavic Corps, a private military company very much resembling Blackwater. According to the statute, this formation was supposed to protect merchant ships from sea pirates, as well as protect deposits and oil pipelines in Syria. But instead, 276 mercenaries of the Slavic Corps appeared at the epicenter of the civil war in Syria and were badly battered by the Army of Islam units in the battles for the city of Es-Sukhna. PMC guys took out all the anger for the defeat on the civilian population, shooting people on even the slightest suspicion of involvement with the rebels. Kill, crush, and no matter whom, children, women, old people, men. And 2 months later, the surviving part of the corps returned to Russia, where it got under the flywheel of criminal investigation. Several people were convicted for mercenaries. An reorganized unit was headed by a former lieutenant colonel of main intelligence directorate Dmitry Utkin. It is his name that is associated with the new name of this PMC Wagner. The fact is that Utkin admired the ideology of the Third Reich and works of the opera composer Richard Wagner, who is considered Adolf Hitler's most favorite musician. Utkin took a call sign Wagner for himself, so the company's employees began to be called the Wagner Group or Wagner Orchestra. By the way, the leadership of the company often beats this name in trailers. For example, in many Russian cities, they hand out banners like Orchestra W for the motherland, or if you want to become a military musician, join Wagner. So come on, raise your orchestra members. Let our Russian PMC sound everywhere. And this is despite the fact that mercenarism is officially prohibited in Russia, and such an organization as Wagner is not registered either in the Register of Legal Entities or in any law enforcement agency. Wagner, Mozart, Schubert, call it whatever you want, it doesn't matter. We are simple instructors to help countries in need. This paradoxical situation is surprising to many people. In addition, President Vladimir Putin spoke openly in support of private military companies in 2012. But the law on the legalization of private armies was lost in the lobbies of the State Duma. Experts say that this is due to legal and diplomatic nuances. If needed, it is always possible to disavow Wagner Group members, saying that there are no Russian military personnel, for example, in Sudan or Syria. Maybe these were tourists. How do we know? This is not a Russia state, and they are not combatants. The song "We Are Not There" has been playing for several years, but a reasonable question: where did this forbidden organization obtain the newest mortars, tanks and fighter planes from, is still hanging in the air. The first major Wagner's operation was the occupation of the Ukrainian military bases and elimination of activists in Crimea in 2014. In addition, Dmitry Utkin was frequently seen in the annexed Donetsk and Luhansk. There is plenty of evidence that the Wagner Group members were conducting an assault on the Lugansk airport and were actively taking part in the battle for the Baltseve. For these successful operations, Utkin was awarded the Order of Courage and was invited to an official Kremlin dinner where he took a picture with Putin. As early as 2015, about 400 Wagner's combatants were again deployed to Syria to support President Bashar al-Assad in the war against insurgents. The most serious losses the members of this PMC suffered during the battle for the liberation of Palmyra. More than 30 people were killed and around 100 got various degrees of injuries. Then it turned out that 300-400 rebels attacked. Others darted off, left ammunition at the airport. The rebels got it all. Once again, Russian mercenaries took their anger out on ordinary Syrians, especially women. Human rights activists counted several dozen facts of rape, after which the disgraced Syrian women committed suicide. Looting is the common thing for the Wagner Group's members as well. Someone took jewelry, watches, but I can say that ISIS people are rather poor. The Wagner Group members showed exceptional cruelty to the local population. A video has hit the media where Russian guys brutally killed a Syrian, Mohammed Ismail al-Abdullah, while singing the song "I'm taking a heavy machine gun off my shoulder, I'm shooting the son, then his mom." Here we go, hold the arm. Jumbo, a sign of mercenaries. The man was beaten with a sledgehammer, his head was cut off, and then the corpse was hung up and set on fire. BBC journalists conducted an investigation and were ready to hand over the materials to Russian law enforcement agencies. But Putin said that these people had nothing to do with the Russian armed forces. There is not any Russian soldiers on the territory of Syria or other countries. In 2017, another Wagner corps was deployed to Sudan to support the regime of President Omar Bashir and to suppress civil riots. Russian mercenaries literally drowned several settlements in blood by shooting civilians without trial or investigation. Compared to Syria, there were no mass rapes in Africa, but this has nothing to do with moral principles. Why rape someone if a girl costs there less than a pack of cigarettes? It's a fact. Also, PMC employees fought in Libya on the side of General Haftar, who was trying to overthrow the government in Tripoli, recognized by the international community. The UN Monitoring Committee provided irrefutable facts that Wagner Group members worked as artillery spotters, snipers and saboteurs in Libya, but the Kremlin disarmed the mercenaries again by habitually declaring, "We are not there." In 2018, the military instructors of the Russian PMC were spotted in the Central African Republic. There, they were responsible for training the army of President Faustin Archange Touadera, loyal to the Kremlin. In the Central African Republic, mercenaries got into another high-profile international scandal, when under mysterious circumstances, 3 Russian journalists, Orhan Jamal, Alexander Rostorguyev and Kirill Radchenko were killed. They were investigating the activities of Wagner PMC, and again, the president of Russia said with innocent eyes, "We had nothing to do with it." They came to Africa without any notification of the local authorities. These journalists went there as ordinary tourists and were killed by some local groups. The murdered journalists managed to unearth a lot of things about Wagner. It turned out that all the instructors sent to the CAR had signed contracts for the energy facilities protection with firms M Finance and M Invest, owned by businessman Yevgeny Prigozhin, who is unofficially called Putin's cook. This nickname is due to the fact that Prigozhin's company's supply produced to the administration of the President of Russia. Let's begin with Wagner's and my cooks. All my cooks are FSB employees, they are military men. Prigozhin called bullshit his involvement in Wagner for a long time. Just in September 2022, he had finally publicly admitted that he was at the origins of this organization, and his concern Concord fully financed the PMC. But Prigozhin modestly omitted the fact that financing was carried out at the expense of multi-billion government contracts. For example, he received an order to provide food for several military districts, the office of the State Duma, as well as all Moscow and St. Petersburg schools and kindergartens. In addition, Prigozhin operates a construction business and receives large subsidies from the state budget. However, foreign intelligence services were well aware that it was Prigozhin who financed Wagner. Back in 2016, a CIA monitoring report was published stating that Wagner subsidiaries, in exchange for military services and arms trafficking, received colossal privileges for the use of minerals and natural resources. For example, Europolis Enterprise, connected with this businessman, signed a contract to develop gas and oil deposits in Syria, bought out gold mines in Sudan, gained control of the largest diamond mine in the Central African Republic, and like at the wave of a magic wand, Wagner had appeared in the very same countries.
We turn now to something called the Wagner Group.
Russian private military company Wagner.
The group, as we know it, first popped up in Ukraine.
Because of this, Prigozhin, his family members and the control companies fell under the sanctions of the United States, the European Union and other countries. So who is he in reality? Yevgeny Prigozhin was born in 1961 in Leningrad. Grew up with a stepfather, finished a sports boarding school, and in 1981 he was sentenced to 10 years in high-security prison for theft, robbery, fraud, involving minors in prostitution. After being released from prison, Prigozhin organized a hot dog vending network and a supermarket network Contrast. In 1996, he founded his main business asset, a holding company Concord, specializing in grocery deliveries. In 1998, Prigozhin opened a boat restaurant, New Island, which became a popular spot among the Russian financial and political elite. In 2001, the presidents of Russia and France had dinner there, and in 2002, Vladimir Putin received the American President George W. Bush. Nowadays, Prigozhin is among the 100 top richest people in Russia. Forbes estimates his fortune at 250 million, but financial analysts say that this is just the tip of the iceberg, and in fact, the capital of the businessman is a few times larger. The American FBI has put Prigozhin on the wanted list and is offering a $250,000 reward for information leading to his arrest. But this sanction is connected not so much to the PMC, but to the interference in the US 2016 elections. The FBI has established that it is Prigozhin who controls and finances the so-called St. Petersburg troll factory. Using fake accounts in major social networks, trolls are engaged in disinformation and forming the sought public opinion, both in Russia and abroad. In 2022, Prigozhin admitted to interfering in the American elections. Gentlemen, we have interfered, we are interfering, and we will interfere neatly, precisely, surgically, and in our way, as we know how. During pinpoint operations, we will remove both kidneys and the liver. Prigozhin's press office responded. There is evidence that during the early days of Wagner, Prigozhin provided just funding for the PMC, but then he realized what strength and power a personal army can promise. He began to visit training grounds, giving orders, thus demonstrating who was in charge there. Furthermore, Prigozhin gradually replaced the old staff, appointing his people in key positions, thus becoming the sole owner of the PMC. Same fate was sealed for Dmitry Utkin, the first Wagner commander. Taking into account his past merits, Prigozhin appointed him as a general director of Concord Management and Consulting. The RBC magazine estimates the annual allowance of the Wagner Group at about 9 to 10 billion rubles, including salaries, depot supplies, accommodation, meals and business trips abroad. And now let's get acquainted with the internal kitchen of PMC in detail. We collected this information literally bit by bit from reporters' investigations, interviews with the Wagner Group members, as well as from PMC's classified documents leaked to the media. The recruiters enroll not just citizens of Russia. The organization also includes residents of the annexed regions of eastern Ukraine, Belarus, Moldova and Central Asia. Military service experience is also not necessary. For example, a Serbian battalion was formed in 2017. It includes several criminals who were wanted in their homeland. The Wagner Group members adopted this practice from the French Foreign Legion. Few people know that the Legion was created by the French King Louis Philippe back in 1831. It recruited foreign warriors and Frenchmen who were in trouble with the law. The cunning idea of Louis Philippe was crowned with the success. He not only got professional thugs for colonial expeditions, but also got rid of the criminal elements inside the country. After the end of the Second World War, French Foreign Legion was replenished with several hundred Wehrmacht officers, who would be executed for war crimes and genocide of civilians. But nevertheless, the main emphasis of Wagner Group recruiters is on the Russian military, especially those who took part in military conflicts. All recruits are brought to farm Milkino in Krasnodar Oblast, where the 10th Separate Brigade of the Special Forces of the Main Intelligence Directorate, GRU, is deployed. Next to it is the Wagner training base. Security officers check all personal belongings and confiscate all electronics gadgets without exception at the so-called checkpoint filter. It is forbidden to have a touchscreen phone. Previously, we would leave it in the supply room. Now you can't bring it into the campsite. Then the security officer checks a recruit in the tax police debtors database and in the register of bank loans. If there are debts, no one will talk to you at all. You pack your things and go home. A criminal record does not matter. The main thing is that you shouldn't be fugitive and hiding from the investigation. Next is the most important test by a lie detector. First of all, the inspectors are interested in whether the applicant has ever committed a murder, whether he has acquaintance in law enforcement agency, especially in the FSB. Apparently, the notorious competition of departments introduced by Stalin is still relevant, since Wagner closely cooperates with FSB during business trips abroad. Oh, let's say, do you know any journalists? Well, so you answered no, then remember that you do, and you are thinking that they will find out anyway. Gotcha, you fooled us, so you missed the polygraph. Go home and you are blacklisted. Among other things, the inspectors are interested in the motive of service in PMC. Any type of ideological, jingoistic patriots are treated with suspicion, but if the applicant declares that he wants to earn a big sum of money, then it's fine. Discipline is the first of all. There is no waffling here. Everyone knows what he is doing, where he is going. After all screening stages are done, a new recruit is enlisted into the PMC and the salary is discussed. Soldier's salary is about 200k rubles. For a commander, it can make 350k rubles. Besides, bonuses for participations in combat operations are also discussed. For example, the bonus for the liberation of Palmyra in Syria was 700k rubles. Former Wagner Group members disclosed that a single business trip abroad could bring more than 1 million rubles, a fantastic amount of money in Russia. Such a salary is unattainable for a qualified specialist for the whole year, not even mentioning a regular employee. The Wagner PMC training base is not just close to the training ground of the 10th Brigade of GRU Special Forces. It is the officers of this elite unit who are engaged in training and combat preparation of mercenaries. The course lasts from 3 to 8 months, depending on the type of troops and qualifications of the mercenary. Then he signs a fictitious contract with the ghost company and goes on a business trip. Former Wagner Group members admit that the worst business trip is considered to be in the Central African Republic. It is related to the alarming rate of malaria cases. The disease can be treated exclusively with quinine or strong medicine destroying the liver. In such a case, the whole salary could be spent on medicine. Since 2020, the number of international business trips has sharply increased, especially to Africa. According to Bloomberg, Prigozhin's group have been deployed in Algeria, Libya, Nigeria, Ethiopia, Sudan, Angola, the Democratic Republic of Congo. It is an interesting fact that practically all of these countries are former colonies of France. And here we will again recall the French Foreign Legion. Many politicians accused official Paris that the legionaries were used not for military but for economic purposes. In Nigeria and Mali, for example, they guarded France's uranium concessions, and 14 countries of the Black Continent gave 80% of all gold and foreign exchange reserves to French banks. And as soon as some riots or rebellions began, the Foreign Legion came into play. But in 2019, the French authorities, under public pressure, changed their foreign policy and began to withdraw the military contingent from the former colonies. And Wagner instantly took advantage of this factor, staging several coups d'état. So in 2020, as a result of coup in Mali, a military junta came to power. The French timidly accused the Kremlin of supporting the illegal regime, but Foreign Minister Lavrov denied these facts. He said that the Malians themselves turned to the PMC to assist in the fight against terrorism, and there is not a single cadre Russian military in Mali. Thus, the gold and uranium mines previously controlled by French came under Wagner's protection. A year later, according to the same scenario, there was a coup in another former colony of France, Burkina Faso. With the help of Russian mercenaries, the commander of the Cobra Special Forces, Ibrahim Traoré, seized power there. While the French Foreign Legion was deployed in Burkina Faso, Russians were even afraid to breathe in that direction. In February 2022, all Wagner forces not involved in foreign business trips were thrown into Ukraine. According to the Times, about 4,000 Wagner's fighters in February entered via Belarus and acted in the Kiev direction. The German edition of Der Spiegel also has irrefutable facts that PMC mercenaries together with the Kadyrov fighters committed war crimes in Bucha, looted, raped women, shot old people and small children. According to Ukrainian intelligence, Wagner fighters were used as the main striking force in the Lugansk region, as a result of which the formation suffered huge losses. But the Russian authorities for the first time confirmed that the presence of the PMC in Ukraine only after the capture of the city of Popasna. Then all the federal channels praised the military band for the hot performance. Wagner Group members, musicians, orchestra players, the PMC Wagners is the most secret organization organization. Interestingly, many former employees of the PMC received an offer to fight in Ukraine, but almost all the same soldiers of fortune refused, knowing how fiercely the Ukrainians were fighting. And if you understand it well, then in serious operations, the Wagner fighters have never really distinguished themselves. It's one thing to clear up Syrian cities after carpet bombing and shoot unarmed Africans, and it's another thing to fight with motivated, angry Ukrainians who are defending their home. Military analysts say that the image of Wagner fighters as tough guys with cool guns was created by television and filmmakers. To do this, Prigozhin ordered several feature films, The Best in Hell, Sun Hit, Granite, telling about Russian mercenaries from an abstract PMC. And the former Wagner fighters who refused to fight in Ukraine were right. The armed forces of Ukraine, AFU, so badly battered the mercenary detachments that they had to recruit even prisoners. To do this, Prigozhin came out of the shadows and began to personally rush around the prisons and colonies, agitating the prisoners to war. If you go with us, there is no way back. No one will return to the prison. Rumor has it that Prigozhin decided to take such a step not only in order to close the front halls with cannon fodder. In fact, he has more far-sighted plans for the criminal world. He needs a personal pack of men without limits, chain dogs, to do the dirtiest work. Kadyrov has evil Chechens who demonstratively cut the throats of Russians, and Prigozhin decided to bet on prisoners, murderers, raiders, and sadists, whom the scared people are afraid of no less than a beer Chechens. As you can see, the businessman who served 10 years has quickly found a common language with criminal authorities, actually formalizing the merge of criminality and power. But what preferences and powers he promised to the authorities of the criminal world, one can only guess. Moreover, in the fall of 2022, Prigozhin rebranded the PMC. The most trained mercenaries were moved to a separate structure called League, and Wagner was left with simpler and worse ones. Some analysts are sure that the militants of the League are needed to perform special sabotage and terrorist tasks at the front and behind enemy lines, while others talk about Prigozhin's Napoleonic plans. If earlier in expert cycles there was a topic about the desire of a businessman to head the Ministry of Defense with $1 trillion budget, in connection with which Prigozhin openly ran over Gerasimov and Shoigu, now there are a persistent rumor about intention to wrestle the entire government under himself to become a puppet master, the second after Putin. His ambitions are grandiose, no wonder he is undeservedly hung 3 hero stars on his chest. And just to intimidate competitors, he needs fighters of the elite league coupled with inmates. Most recently, he openly challenged the Russian oligarchs and elites, accusing them of living comfortably and preventing total population mobilization. No one has dared to do this yet, because no one has its private army behind it. According to the well-known investigative journalist Christo Groziev, 25,000 mercenaries who have passed through the Wagner PMC are ready to support Prigozhin's ambitions by force at any time. Do not forget about the Prigozhin Stroll factory, which will help to quickly influence the minds of Russians and create the right public opinion. And if it does not come in a good way, the Russians' favorite tool for the execution of Wagner contractors, a sledgehammer, will help correct the brains of Russians. We have already seen how mercenaries in Syria crushed the head of the innocent man, and in November 2022, the Wagner contractor Nuzhin was subjected to the same wild execution. The prisoner mercenary surrendered to the AFU and then, to his demise, decided to voluntarily return to Russia as part of a POW exchange. I was informed that I would be tried. Prigozhin commented on this video succinctly, "At dog's death, I applaud standing." And not a single politician, not a single law enforcement officer was outraged by the brutal massacre of thugs of band formation. They are already afraid of Prigozhin. The phantom of the sledgehammer has done its job, and the owner of Wagner feels such moods very subtly. And to again emphasize his superiority, strength and permissiveness, he frankly wrote a boorish statement about the crime addressed to the Prosecutor General of the Russian Federation. It says that Nuzhin was allegedly recruited by the CIA and went to jail for 27 years in advance. Then he joined the Wagner PMC and created the conditions for his execution. This is not even a challenge to business people and local officials. This is a challenge to the state and all those who can stand in the way of Prigozhin's to power. At the same time, many Russian extremists support Wagner's master. For example, a fascist ideologue Alexander Dugin openly calls for removing Putin and taking power into his own hands. Nowadays, in Ukraine, there are several autonomous, uncontrolled armies at war: Korea soldiers, Kadyrov fighters, Wagner fighters, criminals. And if any of these gangs get to power in a state stuffed with the nuclear weapon, it is terrible to imagine that bloodbath this could lead to. Currently, Yevgeny Prigozhin is confidently leading the battle for power, but whether he wants to remain second to Putin is a big question. And here again, the Praetorian Guards come to mind who killed the Emperor Caligula, a pervert, a sadist and tyrant, the same as the current ruler of the Kremlin. It is known that history repeats itself, and perhaps exciting events await us when the cook devours the owner, unleashing his dogs of war and a pack of scumbags on him.